All right, well, the Patriots are matching up against the Texans in 2 days. Joining me now is CBS Sports NFL staff writer Tyler Sullivan. And Tyler, this should be a really fun matchup. You have the Patriots, who scored the most points per game in the AFC this season, going up against this vaunted Texans defense. Let's start with this. The Patriots, right now, they're seen as the favorite in this one. But how do you think New England stacks up against Houston, who's won 10 in a row?
Yeah, I think they stack up pretty well. And I think if you look at the wild card matchups, you'd say those are pretty similar performances, right? You hold them to less than 10 points on defense, both teams. You score enough to win the football game. But I do think that Houston score against Pittsburgh is a little bit misleading. And what I mean by that is you had two defensive touchdowns scored by the Houston Texans. And that offense for the Texans, a little bit shaky. That was a 7-6 ball game for most of that contest. And a lot of the issues on the offensive side of the ball went to CJ Stroud. And CJ Stroud had 5 fumbles, 2 losses in that game. He also had a red zone interception. And the key to that game was that Pittsburgh only scored 3 points off of those 3 turnovers. I look at a New England Patriots team, and if you give them 3 turnovers, I don't think they're coming away with just 3 points. So I do think they match up quite well because the offensive side of the ball, yes, it's a tough matchup against this defense, but if all of a sudden you're going to get short fields from CJ Stroud, I think Drake May and that offense is capable of cashing in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I want to hit on the Houston offense because, first off, the Patriots defense played very well against the Chargers, limiting them to just 3 points. But you look at this Houston offense, they're not fully healthy. And it looks like Nico Collins is not going to play as he continues to work his way through concussion protocol and he hasn't been able to practice this week. How much does that affect the Texans if he's not available?
I think it's huge. And obviously, if Nico Collins doesn't play, that elevates somebody like Christian Kirk, who did have a very good game, over 140 yards receiving and a touchdown against the Steelers. But is that replicable? Can you have that again from a guy like Christian Kirk, especially when you look at the other side with the New England Patriots on the concussion front? It looks like Christian Gonzalez is going to play this weekend. So, kind of a huge swing in terms of that matchup. If both teams are healthy, then that's a really fun duel that we could watch, Nico Collins versus Christian Gonzalez. But now it's Christian Gonzalez possibly against Christian Kirk, and that is very much in favor of the New England Patriots. And so that to me is, I think, what's the most interesting in terms of the have and have not matchup for the New England Patriots. I think they have an edge there now. But yeah, losing Nico Collins is going to be big because one thing that I noticed with CJ Stroud against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was holding the ball a little too much. There was a lot of coverage sacks, I felt like, in that game. And if you don't have your number one wide receiver and those other wideouts are struggling to get open, that's a lot of padding of the football, and that's when you have guys like Cleveland Chason, Milton Williams able to get home like we saw against the Chargers. That might be the same story here in the divisional round.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and we'll see how the Patriots defense ultimately matches up because, everybody's talking about the Texans defense, and rightfully so. Let's hit on some of their numbers. They rank second in the league in points per game at just under 17 and a half. They were first in total yards allowed, fourth in rushing yards allowed, seventh in passing yards allowed. So with all that being said, what do you think is the key for the Patriots offense on Sunday against them?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough, tough task for the New England Patriots. And specifically, what I'm going to be paying attention to is the left side of the offensive line. It was a story in the wild card round. Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, your two rookies, and they look like rookies in their playoff debuts. You had Will Campbell let up 5 pressures and a sack. You had Jared Wilson let up 5 pressures and 2 sacks in that game. And the Chargers are one thing, and when you're going up against a Houston Texans team that has Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Sheldon Rankins, that's a whole different animal and a much tougher task for them to try to hold up and keep Drake May upright. So I was talking about CJ Stroud having some turnovers. Drake May had some turnovers in that game, and a lot of that had to do with, I feel like, there was pressure specifically on that left side. So that's going to be one thing that Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel really need to focus on in terms of what's the protection going to be like for Drake May, specifically on that left side, because it was a weakness in the wild card round. So that to me could end up being one of the key matchups to this game, because if all of a sudden that turns into one of those, old school Western doors and Drake May's under fire for most of that game, that could help tilt this thing in Houston's favor.
As it's related to Drake May, Tyler, how do you think he did against the Chargers, and where do you think he needs to improve the most going up against the Texans?
Yeah, I thought he played well. I mean, it was a shaky first half for him. I think maybe just, first taste of playoff action. That's one of the big unknowns, right, with Drake May. We've seen him blossom into an MVP caliber quarterback this season, but there's always those questions. What's it going to look like in the playoffs, right? Like, what is that next level of competition when the lights get a little bit brighter? What does that look like? And it was a little bit shaky out of the start, but I thought he recovered really well. 11 of 14 in the second half, over 170 yards passing, that really nice touchdown to Hunter Henry to really break the game wide open. So I would say if we're going pass fail, certainly passed in that wild card round. And I think that going into this game, yes, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because of that defense and the Houston Texans have. But overall, I do think that what we saw from him in his playoff debut is very encouraging going forward.
And what makes this matchup fun is that there are a lot of ties between these two franchises. And we've been profiling it, the McDaniels brothers matchup that's going to be going on. You have Stephon Diggs going up against a former franchise that he played with, the last team he played with. Of course, Mike Vrabel was at one point a former coach on the Texans staff. So there's a lot of ties between these franchises. But overall, Tyler, what's your favorite matchup in this game that's coming up on Sunday?
So I kind of alluded to it, and my favorite matchup is the Houston Texans pass rush, not up against the left side of the offensive line. It's going up against Drake May's scrambling ability. I think that is one thing that could help negate the Will Andersons and the Danielle Hunters of the world. If all of a sudden Drake May, who is one of the better mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, starts to scramble and help negate that pass rush, I think that could be the X factor to this game. We saw it last week. He had a team high 10 rushing attempts for 66 yards. He is someone who could really be demoralizing to a defense because if you have everything covered on a 3rd and long and you are getting after him with pass rush, he could just run up the middle, get a first down, and slide and keep the chains moving, and there's really nothing you can do about it. So to me, that I think is what's going to be really interesting. How much is Drake May running in this game? Not necessarily running for his life, but just moving the chains, having positive plays, avoiding the sacks, avoiding negative plays. That to me is what I find most interesting because, again, he is one of the more mobile quarterbacks we have in this league right now, and if he can use that strength against this vaunted defense, I think that could really help propel the Patriots.
Yeah, Drake May versus the Texans defense. I cannot wait for this game coming up on Sunday. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. The Patriots 2-0 all time against the Texans as well. We'll see if they can make it 3-0 on Sunday. Tyler, appreciate the time as always.